Hi, friend. Welcome back to the Mindset Check podcast. I'm your host, Misha McKittrick. This is a podcast where we believe that when you take time for a mindset check, you have more power than you think you do. And where we believe that you have immense abilities to change your living by the way you honor the legacy of the people that have gone before you. We're going to jump into that today. Before we do, I have a couple of super fun announcements for you. First, I'm so excited, super pumped, because the Heart Sync course is coming up. Literally, I am so passionate about heart coherence. I believe that every single one of us has this incredible power inside of us, and it's already there. It's just that we need to learn how to use it. When I became a registered heart math technician with the Heart Math Institute, I learned so much of the science behind heart coherence. I think it's really important because when the science stands out in your mind, it helps you to rely and know that what you're doing is real. And then when you really learn the feeling feels so good. You don't ever want to be away from the feeling. And also you learn so many incredible uses, like different ways that you can actually use heart coherence for your benefit. Overall, when we tap into heart coherence often, we experience less conflict, less brain fog, less disconnected and instability, confusion. We experience less of those feelings in our life. And we replace that with more peace, harmony, love, mental clarity, more intuition, direction, inspiration. It is phenomenal. So I really hope that you all sign up for the mini course. Okay, the mini course is just a couple of days where we're going to dive in and really get clear on heart coherence. The mini course is free and it'll be charged with incredible vibration and great information. So I highly recommend that you sign up. The link will be in the comments. And then following that mini course, if you want to learn more, if you want to keep going and you're like, yes, I want to know how to create this inside of me, then we're going to do a 6-week course. A 6-week course where we dive in, we learn all about it. You are going to become a master at creating heart coherence during this course. And you'll learn all those things that we talked about. It's amazing. So I'm really thrilled to be able to be bringing this to you. Go ahead and use the link in the comments below to get signed up and get the emails so you have the links to join the course when it comes up. All right, something else that I'm involved in that's really cool and fun is a huge giveaway with a ton of different professionals that are literally giving so many courses. You can actually win, one of the entries to my course is included in the giveaway. There's a lot of one-on-one coaching and different things. So be watching my Instagram next week to be able to enter that. That'll be really fun. My Instagram is at myfriendmisha if you don't already follow me there. All right, let's get down to business. Let's get into this podcast that is such a fulfilling podcast today. This is something that is really close to our hearts and our family. And, we've been going through a lot of episodes about suicide recently. And this is the redeeming side. Today is the side that has the good news of the story. So I'm really thrilled to share this with you, starting with my husband Jake's perspective. Let's jump in.
Dear Chase, what a difference a few months or even a year can make. I think back to the last varsity game from a year ago, feeling completely robbed by those bad calls that cost us the game, literally cursing at the ref while walking off the field and having to tell my dad weeks later when he confronted me that it must have been someone else like Josh or Ryan. It was another losing season, a terrible wins and loss record that didn't reflect our progress. We all felt so deflated to have it end like that. But if you, or anyone, would have told me that over the next year I would experience the lowest lows, but the highest highs, and described what these would be, I couldn't or wouldn't believe it. We all watched these sports movies like Rudy, a true story of a college kid fulfilling his dream of Notre Dame football, or Field of Dreams, a fictional story of a grown son reconnecting with his deceased father to reconcile pain and regrets. I still marvel that I not only experienced something so great for myself, but what I would consider as the best storyline that you just can't make up. Maybe that's because it's my story, our story. You were there, Chase, weren't you? When Park City High missed that final penalty kick and our team victoriously rushed and piled our keeper Matt Hamlin at the corner flag, you saw me, didn't you? On TV, we see pro athletes point to the sky after they do something amazing, or they win it all. They seem to dedicate it to someone they love, someone they lost, or both. As we became the official, undefeated state champions, the only thing I could think to do was stand in that center circle, all by myself, and point up to you. I've never experienced tears of joy like that. It was all the emotion of recent months wrapped into one. What it was like to lose Misha, what it was like to lose you, what it was like to truly find myself, what it was like to lead such an amazing group of players and so many of our shared friends. The entire bus ride home, maybe you saw that too. I hope you did. I just sat there, staring forward, me and my thoughts, smiling, feeling nothing but gratitude while holding that trophy or watching our teammates and friends do the same. I probably only spoke a few words the entire 5 hours home. Coach Clark even impersonated me at the year-end banquet. Maybe you saw everything else too. The team ride on top of the fire truck, parading all the way down Main Street, passing the classmates like Keith Sorensen who were saluting us outside the movie theater as we drove by with sirens blaring, watching us be welcomed home at the parking lot like fans do to celebrities and rock stars. We did it, Chase. We pulled off the unthinkable, the impossible. An undefeated season, and after the most nerve-wracking semifinal and final, that quarterfinal game against Wasatch, easy, a 4-0 win at home, scoring 2 goals. Hey, even Misha stopped by at the end, a bit awkward with my girlfriend Sarah waiting to talk to me next in line. That semifinal, Josh's cross and my diving header goal in the first few minutes. All of us running back to the center line, twirling our jerseys and being threatened by yellow cards if we do that again. But we were overconfident. We didn't play the rest of the game as the better team. We forgot what made us great. The trio of heart, humility, and just enough talent. We really had to grind out the rest of that game for just the 1-0 win. The final, wow, going down 1-0. It might have been the first time all season we were down a goal. The second half coming to an end, and me thinking, well, bummer, but it's amazing we at least made it this far. Just to have Kevin score an identical goal from the same place Park City did in the first half, to send it to overtime. My penalty kick in the shootout, scared out of my mind after scoring to the right when I always go left, but feeling I should go right and luckily watching the keeper go the other way. Or was it luck? Was it you that nudged me on that one? What else did you see? What else did you do? Did you see the times during the season I had to walk up to teammates and ask them to let it go, to not talk to the ref, to not get angry, and to remember who we are and what we are not? You did it, Chase. You changed our hearts. You brought out the best in us. You brought out the best in me. I changed my life because of you. I changed my music. I changed the pictures on my wall. I changed how I treat others or talk about them or even think about them. I even look back to that 2-week absence, my first day back to school after your Montana funeral, and the same thing that 3 classmates said to me, independent of each other. What a miracle. What a gift you gave me. I think back to the experience in the bookstore, the uplifting music I was listening to through the corded headphones attached to the wall unit, the pictures and paintings I was staring at when I experienced yet another life-changing moment. You were there, Chase, weren't you? You were part of it all. Thank you, Chase, for letting me be part of your legacy. I will never look at the number 7 the same, ever again. Etched in stone is a story of a program winning 4 games in 3 years, who somehow defied the odds to win it all. Sitting in the gym of Cedar High will be our state champ banner high up on the wall. But very few will ever know the real story, your story. I imagine that someday I'll have kids of my own to keep your legacy alive by the jersey on their back or the person they are being. Someday I'll know if it was all you. But for now, I choose to believe it was. Till we meet again, Jake.
I'm so touched listening to Jake's story. I'm touched to think about the ways that this experience has impacted our whole life. The change that happened inside of Jake that truly propelled a legacy. Our boys have worn the number 7 on their back since they had jerseys on. And I'm telling you that I've been to my fair share of soccer games. And it's interesting when they have not been able to wear the number 7. Maybe somebody else has spoken for it on a team, or they're on a team that their older brother is on that already is wearing the number 7. And there have only been a couple of years or seasons that has happened. But it does always feel like something's missing. How cool is that? When my kids were little boys, we visited the cemetery in Montana. We were there for the 100-year reunion for the ranch, for his dad's side of the family. And we went to the cemetery where Chase was buried. It's also where Grandpa Mac is buried. That's Jake's grandpa. And Uncle Trent, who is Chase's dad. And it's on this beautiful green hillside. Absolutely stunning and breathtaking. And there's simply a fence around the cemetery that separates it from the vast landscape. And when we were there were wildflowers growing everywhere. And the boys ran out in the field and they picked tons of flowers, and they were coming back, and they were so happy with these looks on their faces in a bright, beautiful summer day. And they all had these purple, bandanas tied around their necks or around them somewhere, because that signified our family during the reunion. And they brought these bunches of flowers, and they put some on, Chase's grave, and some on Grandpa's grave, and some on Uncle Trent's grave. And then there was a moment at the end where we were standing at Chase's grave, and we bent down and we were talking to them about Chase. And the moment that we said, Chase is the one we play for. Chase is number 7. They went and got all the flowers that they put on the other graves. And they only left a few so they could put a huge pile on Chase's grave. It was just one of the most heart-fulfilling moments as a parent to see the devotion and the legacy that's alive in these little boys because of the story that their dad experienced with their cousin. My boys, as they've gotten older, they also, write meaningful things on athletic tape and put it around their wrist during important games. And one of the things that they write often is 796, which is Chase's number and the year he passed. And to them, that means leave a legacy. We've also etched necklaces with 796. It's in frames, it's on bodies, it's everywhere. It's just a part of us. It's brought a lot of meaning to our life. Mitch Albom says, death ends a life, not a relationship. And I just look at the story that Jake just told and how absolutely beautiful it was that he continued to feel Chase after Chase passed. And I want to talk about how he had access to that, how we need to place ourselves both in the right state and in the right circumstances to be able to feel that. And not all the time, right? Sometimes those things come wildly in the craziest places and by surprise. But there are things that we can do to facilitate those things. And a lot of it has to do with our internal state, the state that we carry around the events and the hard. I was thinking today that life really isn't hard. It's the complexity that we bring to life that makes it hard. Yeah, we go through hard things. We experience a few hard things in life that are truly defined as hard. But the way we carry them, the way that we process them, defines if they remain hard. And a lot of people get stuck with suicide. A lot of people struggle big time. And obviously, it's a really big thing. But I have seen people that I know and friends of mine who have struggled more than they need to. More than they need to. And so I want to share some things that I observed with the situation with Jake and talking to him later that helped. That helped him, that helped his family. And I want to dive into those things. And I want to talk all about how a legacy becomes a legacy. One of the things that happened with Chase passing was that there was actually 2 funerals, and it felt like a really big procession, like a really big to-do. And they had a funeral for him in Cedar City, where Jake's family was at. And then they had a funeral for him in Montana. And they drove all of that way to put him to rest in the space where all of the family was buried in the cemetery on the hillside. And it was in the dead of winter, and that was a lot of devotion to do that. And I think having time and space away from normal life, a lot of time driving and listening to music that applied to each, member. I'm sure that they had their own, I don't even know back then if they would have even had their own devices to listen to or if they listened as a family, but I know that music was really, really big for Jake. Some of the things that he and his family listened to. And I think it allowed each person a lot of space and a lot of time to just process as they went through the motions of properly honoring Chase. They gathered pictures and organized memories, and there was a lot behind the preparation. Trent and Donna, Chase's parents, obviously they came first to Cedar City. Remember, they were in Canada, and they came, and there was a church leader that came to be at the funeral, officiate, and give a speech. One of the things that he said in his talk, and I remember this from being there, is he really talked about suicide and how suicide under a circumstance where if it were a choice, okay, if it were a decision that someone made, that that would be the wrong thing to do, to take your life, like spiritually in the eyes of God, right? And a lot of times we approach suicide with that thinking. And so I think it was really important, the distinction that he made. He said, when we lose someone to suicide, they were not in a state that was a decision-making state. They were in a state where their brain was suffering, and they were not able to make the choices that they would make if they were in a stable situation in upstairs. And he encouraged us to not make judgment around something that we don't understand. If it's a place that we had never been in our mind, if we had never been close to that spot, to leave that up to God and to be able to accept that this was an unconscious happening. And I think when we recognize the unconsciousness of it, it does make it easier to process. All of a sudden, it turns our thoughts and our hearts to compassion instead of betrayal. It turns our thoughts into, oh my word, I can see different circumstances that led to this state, and not at the fault of any one person. You know, that is the human web. And even if there are obvious faults, I really believe that that's not ours unless the fault really is ours. And I believe that we can reconcile that and we can handle all of that. And we can come to a place where our hearts are whole again. You know, I love nature, and I love this example when we're thinking about how life is for other people and when we're trying to understand it. Possums appear like they're playing dead when they're frightened, like that they're actually really smart animals. And they've come to discover that when they're frightened, they're not being smart. They are actually overstimulated and they pass out. I love this example because it helps us see that it's not always what we think we see. And I think that that helps us move into a space of acceptance. I love the quote, everyone is doing the best they can with the level of consciousness that they are at. There was an event that happened in our life within recent years, maybe 5 years ago, where a really good friend of one of my sons, his brother, was lost to suicide. When Jake's dad was visiting and the family was in the newness of processing everything that was happening, we offered to make a visit and take something over, but the main point of the visit was also for Jake's dad to be a compassionate shoulder, because it was Jake's dad that found Chase, and he knew what that felt like. Often when that happens, it's difficult because there's not a whole bunch of people that relate to that circumstance. And I remember sitting down with this father that had lost his son, and he was describing what happened the moment that he walked in on the scene. He heard the voice of his son say, "Dad, it was an accident." The moment that he said that, Jake's dad got teary and said, "I felt the same thing." And I was sitting there a little bit confused, like, an accident? What do you mean, like the gun misfired? That doesn't make any sense. And later in the conversation, I learned that the whole thing is just an accident. Like me having these thoughts and the whole thing was an accident. And I thought that was really interesting that they both had that similar experience that helped them in their processing. I've heard other people who have actually survived suicide attempts, and they say that the first thing that they think or that they feel is the regret of what was happening. Even before they consciously could register, oh, I'm still alive. It's this deep sense of remorse immediately. And I think that's really important to remember, because I think I've read a lot about survivors, and they can sometimes experience a brokenness in trusting people around them because of the circumstances of the past. And I believe that when we gain a different type of understanding around it, that it allows us to heal not only the relationship with the loved one that we lost, but in going forward, in the relationships that we have in the future. There's a really interesting experiment that I want to share with you that helps illustrate that what goes on inside of us, like our own hormones, which come from our feelings and our thoughts, how that also plays out in the way that we are thinking and processing the things that we're going through. This is very applicable for all types of feelings where we might have felt betrayal or holding a grudge. It's a very interesting experiment. And this experiment is found in the book Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza. So in the experiment, they played a game. And in the game, there's an investor and there's a trustee. And the investor is given a certain amount of money, and they can choose to keep the money, or if they share it with another player that was called the trustee, the sum that the investor received is tripled. The thing is they have to then rely on the trustee to make the decision to, split the money somehow in a favorable way. Or, whatever. The decision is left to the trustee to decide what to do with the money at that point. So the investor is taking a chance, giving money to the trustee, not knowing if he'll get any money back. Okay? So the investor is hoping to make a profit. And either decision can come down to betrayal, right? Because if the investor doesn't give to the trustee, then the trustee feels gypped. And if the trustee doesn't give back to the investor, then the investor feels gypped, right? What they wanted to test is if they were able to introduce oxytocin, if it would actually change the way the game was played. In the study, the researchers gave some of the players a squirt of oxytocin in their nose before the game, and some of them they gave a squirt of placebo, right? So every single player received a squirt of some kind. And then they were hooked up to an fMRI, which, shows the imaging of their brain and different areas that are firing and what is going on inside of the brain. And after the first 6 rounds of playing the game, the investors were given feedback on their investments and were notified that their trust had been betrayed about half of the time. Okay, so they didn't receive money back half of the time. And the participants who received the placebo before they played, they felt angry. They felt betrayed. They felt these negative feelings, right? And so in the next rounds, they invested much less in the latter half of the game. They did 6 more rounds. But the participants who received a squirt of oxytocin invested the same amount as they did the first rounds, despite having been betrayed. The brains of the participants who received the oxytocin had much lower activity in the amygdala. The amygdala is the space where we have anger and fear. And they also had lower activity in the area of the brain where they needed positive results to make future decisions. Like that was dampened. Essentially what the study was able to figure out is that oxytocin and the higher levels of oxytocin in our brain cools off the circuits that, create fear and sadness and pain, anxiety, aggression, anger. And then the only thing that we're left with is a love for life. I wish I knew just a little bit more about the study, because I kind of feel like we're going to play the game anyway. We might as well play it with good feelings. Like, you're going to make a decision to, either give the money or keep the money. And in the end, what if it all really just settled out that you received the same? Whether you gave more or you kind of kept more. I would also venture to say that the more that we associate with the feeling good, the good feelings, the more that we will attract, like more abundance, more of the money coming back to us. That's just kind of an interesting side note and a thought to think about when we're playing this game called life. And wouldn't you rather just go through life with good feelings? I thought that study wildly applied to this situation simply because if people experience a feeling of betrayal, we're experiencing it inside of our bodies because of the hormones that we're feeling. And if we can correct those hormones, if we can do something different to them, then we can also change the thoughts that we're thinking. And that can lead to having more compassion and more acceptance and, a better way to experience the hard. In looking at Jake's experience, I would say that he had a couple of different angles that helped him or assisted him in the boost of oxytocin. Ooh, somebody's at the door. All right, I just got back from opening the door. And I wanted to leave this in the episode for a certain reason, because I opened the door, I paused everything that I'm doing in the flow to go attend to the door because I'm the only one home. And when I got there, there was no one there. So someone had done a ring and run, right? Well, I could kind of let that set me into a tailspin and throw me off my groove. Or, I can let those levels of oxytocin kick in and have a great laugh about it. A little pause in our program just to have a little real life example. Moving forward, you're probably wondering, if you don't know, what elicits oxytocin inside of our bodies. Oxytocin comes from good feelings of love, care, appreciation, these types of things. In the study, the participants were given an outside form of oxytocin, but we can give ourselves doses of oxytocin. And I believe that Jake had a couple of different angles, as I was saying, that helped and assisted his body actually receive those boosts of oxytocin to help him also in the processing it. I think a lot of the things that he did with the processing, the things that we talked about, and more, there's more. I mean, even those circumstances on the field, the experience in the bookstore, he took time for a quiet moment to go into a bookstore, that he was surrounded with really spiritual things in this bookstore, because this bookstore was also a religious bookstore. There were pictures all over the wall of Christ, of Jesus. And he was listening to music, and he just had this overwhelming experience. And I think it's interesting that the other parts were the encounters where he felt him. So he actively did some things that helped in the processing. And then he had kind of some neat encounters where he experienced chase, where he experienced the love of God, where he experienced being held, in this container of comfort. And I think it's interesting to point out that one can invite the other. Taking the time to process, taking the time to move through our feelings and feel all the grief and all the things that they did to process, can also invite the space where they get to have those encounters. Whereas if we resort to negative feelings and anger and all of those things, sometimes that shuts that out. And there's so many ways that we can initiate elevating those oxytocin levels through processing. You can replay the moments that you had with them in your heart, in your mind. You can journal about those things. You can take time to decide what it is, the story that you're telling, right? Like either inside of the group that you are experiencing the grief with, like your family and your friends, the people around you, or the story that you tell in your head by writing it out. I always am a really big believer in hand therapy and allowing that, whatever that is, gardening, painting, whatever, that kind of leather working, something like that, that you're just kind of working with your hands, but you're letting your brain just process. I love the tip, and I'm going to just kind of give a few little tips about this. And I want to also just mention that we've been through this a lot. When we did the first season, we went through a lot of grief. And so we went, starting in episode 51, we did a lot around different and creative ways. But I'm going to give you a little list today. And if you want to reference more, you can look to those episodes. So one thing that I love is talking to them. Just talk out loud to them. It doesn't mean that you're crazy, just do it. Writing letters to them, keeping photos of that person around, incorporating that loved one into the events and the special days. On my sister's wedding day, we had these tiny, adorable little frames that we put pictures of my dad and Taylor and Ed's grandmother, and they chose the pictures of the people that they wish were there. They used pins to put them into the bouquet that had a little pearl on the end, and it was just the most gorgeous way to incorporate your loved one at the event. And at my other sister's wedding, it was the coolest thing. My dad, I was sweeping my porch one day, and we were kind of prepping for April's wedding, and my dad appeared. And those of you who have been listening to the podcast for a long time, you know that when he, I don't mean he appears like I saw him, but I had a little visit from him. And you know, if you've been listening, that a lot of times that's accompanied by a feather. And I was sweeping my porch, and there was like this feather, and which is kind of a, normal thing. And sometimes if I see a feather, it's, just a feather. But every time that it's a feather that's sort of put in a strange place on purpose, it also comes with a feeling. And there was this overwhelming feeling. And I heard my dad ask me, Mish, will you do something for me? Will you make this? And he wanted me to create a video. Oh, it's such a touching thing. He wanted me to create a video of all the pictures that we had with my dad and April, and to play their song and to project that up on the wall during the daddy-daughter dance, and to ask his brothers to tap in and fill in for him. It was like, I'm just sitting there on my porch that morning, just sobbing and like, yes, Dad, yes, I'll do that. Finding ways that we can incorporate our loved one into special days is such a great way to keep them with us. Another great thing that I thought was, imagine what advice they would give you when you're making tough decisions. Talk about them with people, even new people who never ever got to know them. Living your life in a way that they would be proud of is a huge way to honor them. Finish a project they were working on, taking a trip they always wanted to take, maybe adopt a hobby that they enjoyed. There was a suggestion called Create a Dear Photograph. This is so cool. It's a fun little project where you print pictures of them in their life in settings that still exist today. Okay, so like maybe the tree out in front of the house, if they were climbing that tree and you have a picture of them, go hold the picture and line it up with the branches and kind of get as far away as the picture was taken and snap that photo. Somehow it kind of like brings them into modern day. Or I saw another one where there was this picture of these people near a mantle, like a fireplace mantle, and everything has been updated, but you can tell it's the same mantle. And they held the picture and they snapped it and then You could tell that the modern day was all around the outside, but the picture was lined up perfectly so that the lines of the mantle and the existing environment matched and lined up. You know, this really cool way to sort of bring them with you forward in life. It's a really powerful and symbolic reminder that they are still with us and still impacting us in the present day. And, you know, planning for birthdays and anniversaries and celebrating those things, you know, that's something that I am really big on. Keeping treasures that they loved, things that, you know, I remember when Jake's grandfather had passed and his grandma lived for a long time after he had passed. And we would get the sweetest little treasures for Christmas. One of his old pocket knives or a wallet, or, you know, she would just give these very meaningful gifts. I thought that was a really great way to honor him and remember him and bring him into the holidays. And I love always enjoying foods that they loved. You know, it has a very interesting way of bringing them with you, you know, especially during those celebrations and the times where you're really wanting to reach out and remember them. I love the quote by John Mayer that says, "Thank God for our ability to remember those who have left us. It's one of the rare divine traits of being human. We can reflect and revisit and keep the flame of someone's impact on our lives burning bright. Thank God we don't ever have to let go. Thank God for our memories." And you can see how those circumstances, those suggestions, they evoke and ignite these feelings of love, care, appreciation, gratitude, right? All of these feelings that can bring oxytocin to our bodies. There's also another way that we can bring oxytocin to our bodies that I'm wildly passionate about, called heart coherence. And creating heart coherence inside of our body is a very effective way to make sure that we are constantly having this drip of oxytocin in our life. And what is it going to do? Make every single day better. Like, you can truly be in love with life. You don't always have to do a major project to evoke the feelings, right? We can sit down in a meditation for 15 minutes and make that part of our routine, and it changes and alters our whole life. So hopefully you get a little glimpse about why I am so passionate about making heart coherence a part of my day every day, and about teaching you how to do it too. It's so cool. I love that whole idea of how oxytocin completely changes our experiences. It's our actions. It's our actions that bring that into our life. There's a part in Jake's monologue that he says, "You did it, Chase. You changed our hearts. You brought out the best in us. You brought out the best in me." And I would say that they did it together. The way that Chase showed up altered his legacy for Jake, like forever. Forever, it's etched in his heart. And I would say that I believe that that is what our loved ones who have passed, and it doesn't matter how they've passed, that's what they do if we let them. I love that we can also let their legacy give us meaning, like a reason to point to the sky, a reason to live a fulfilling life, a very full, good life. They change our hearts. They change our lives. Jake said, "I changed my life because of you. I changed my music. I changed the pictures on my wall. I changed the way I treat others or talk about them or even think about them." It's an opportunity to make decisions on how to fill your life with more love and more purpose, and to do all that you can do to live your life in a way that honors the wish that immediately they had after the tragedy. I wish that this wasn't the outcome. The accident. Just a couple months ago, our family was back at the family cemetery in Montana because Jake's grandma had passed away and we were having her memorial. And I was having a conversation with one of my boys. And I was asking him, what do you think it really is that leaves a legacy? Because some people, think, and some people think that leaving a legacy means you're leaving a lot of money. You're leaving college tuition. You're leaving, which, yes, that's a legacy, sure. And no matter how you live, you're leaving a legacy no matter what. No matter how you live, it's some type of a legacy. Right? So whether it's negative or whether it's money or whether it's good and filled with love and good feelings or whether it promotes, something deep inside someone to want to do better and live better. But Scotty and I concluded that what leaves a legacy is the way that those around you love you. And the way that you touched their souls to carry that love. A legacy is not a legacy if no one remembers or thinks about it. Right? And we all have the opportunity to make legacies out of the people that we love by being really clear on what their life evoked in us. What was the example that they gave to us? And part of that comes from also holding compassion with the way that we could see that their life was. If their life wasn't also good enough, actually, I would really challenge everybody on that. If you ever felt like someone's life wasn't enough to kind of leave a legacy for you, there's a challenge there. I was recently doing a meditation called the Ho'oponopono meditation, and I love this, and I can't wait to research it more and share it more with you. But the whole idea is that the brokenness exists because it also exists in us. And when we heal that, we heal the people around us. We heal the perspective. We heal so many levels in so many different ways. It's deep. We're going to do and dive into that more and more later. But I would venture to say that there's a legacy and an opportunity for a legacy with everybody in our life that we love. There's a children's book called The Invisible String that I just love. And there's this little part in the book where this mom is sitting in a chair and talking to her kids who are kind of gathered up and curled up next to her on the floor. She's telling them about this invisible string that exists between everybody. Even when we're not together, that we're connected. And the kids are confused and they're like, well, I don't see a string. And she's trying to explain to them that it's invisible and that it is a very special string that's made of love. And that even though we can't see with our eyes that this string exists, that it's always connected to everyone we love, no matter if it's someone that we are able to be sharing our life with, living in the same home with or the same city with, or whether they're distant and far away, or whether they're in heaven and far away from us. We're all connected by this incredible and beautiful string that we cannot see, but yet we can feel it. The way to have the people that we love live on is to never stop loving them. And we get to create a legacy, both with the experiences that we have with them here and the experiences that we have with them after they're gone. They're all real. You're not crazy. It's the most beautiful thing when they can come into your space and touch your soul. And I hope that you can see today that by your actions, the things that you do, you get to be connected to the ones that you love. And through that, you have more power than you think you do. I hope you love this episode. I hope that it brings depth to the way that you create your legacies. And if you know someone, especially someone in your family, that you're really trying to help walk through this, like walking through it together brings a lot of healing too. So just an opportunity to share if that feels aligned for you. Something I wanted to throw out there is that Jake and I are going to be doing an episode together, side by side, just talking and chatting. And we're going to be sharing more about his story and his encounter with hard, right? With hard and suicidal ideation and different things like that. But I wanted to open a space for you to submit questions that you might have and might want us to talk about during that episode. And if you have any questions, you can email them to me at hello@myfriendmisha.com, or you can find me on Instagram at myfriendmisha and just send me a DM. Also, don't forget to get on the list for the HeartSync mini course that's free, that's coming up. The link for that will be in the show notes. I would love to have you there and to expose you to heart coherence more completely. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me, for being here. I love doing this, and it brings me great joy that it benefits you. So thank you for letting me walk with you on your journey. And I am wishing you the very best in all of the processing, all of the ways that you invite cool, neat experiences that raise your levels of oxytocin and help you to create a legacy. Until next time, my friend.